Hello and welcome to the Rant Presents Versus. I am Josh, and this is my Versus show where I pit two games against each other in a duel to the death. Pretty literally for this one, so let's just jump right in with this episode of Versus, which is BloodBorne versus Dark Souls 3. I'm just gonna get right to it because I know I'm gonna go off on some rant somewhere in this one. So let's start with category number one. And category number one is graphics. And actually, this one actually matters. I know a lot of the times I throw graphics in here just because hey, it's a category that just needs to be said. Well, this one it actually kind of matters because I'll go over. So Bloodborne's graphics, they're really on point in this game because it combines that gothic element that they have and this dark element and it kind of infuses them together. No, the sky isn't very pretty, but all the landscapes, even things that are far away, they look great. They look beautiful. I really enjoy looking at Bloodborne. Everything is designed really well. All the pathways, the secret ways, the different buildings, they're all nicely done and they look and feel gothic and deadly, if you really want to say that. And in Dark Souls, it kind of gets the same vibe. They kind of tried to do something that was a Bloodborne Dark Souls mix. And no, once again, the sky is just not that pretty. But a lot of the landscapes you can see, especially the stuff that's like distant, like you know you're going to be there eventually. It's just kind of there, way in the background. They look pretty good. And they're nicely done, well rendered out. It's the stuff that's close by you that doesn't look as good as it probably could. And I know this is really picking teeth, really ridiculous to say, but the graphics are good, but they don't feel polished. And in a game nowadays that we're spoiled in that much, I like my games to look a little bit more polished than this one, and this one does not look as polished as Bloodborne or some of the games that have been coming out this year so far. Which is why Bloodborne takes the point in the graphics department. Category number two. Category number two is story. And yeah, both these games have a story to them. Bloodborne's story centers around a nightmare, the hunter's nightmare. And this is it's a little hard to explain because it is very detailed. But the bottom line is you're a hunter, you're in a nightmare, and you're just killing monsters to vanquish the nightmare. And once you kill the last one, you can either choose to, succumb to the nightmare and die and awaken anew, or you can become the watcher over the nightmare, or there's a third ending where you can just slaughter the nightmare. But the story elements in between those areas, the stories behind these big bosses, the stories behind the areas, very well fleshed out, very well detailed, if you're willing to look into it, if you're willing to read the quips and quos. As for Dark Souls, it has an interesting story as well. You awaken anew, of course, as an undead, and you're trying to find the four giants in this council. The Ashen Ones is what you're called, actually. You can oh, Jesus Christ. You can use the ashes to strengthen you and strengthen your character for a short time. And every time you kill a boss, you get ashes as well, so that allows you to be strengthened. And throughout the game, the story's a little bit more behind the scenes in this one. It's not like outright, well, I guess Bloodborne isn't really outright, but, it's not as, in your... I can't even say in your face, because Bloodborne's wasn't as in your face either. It's behind the scenes, a little bit more dug in than Bloodborne. There's a lot of question marks around areas, and it seems like a lot of this stuff is just there to just be difficult. And I know I've said in a review on my own personal channel, that the game is a lot easier than the other Dark Souls. Yeah, and it really is. And a lot of the things just seems to be random, just trying to be difficult. So that's why I have to give story to Bloodborne as well. Category number 3. Category number 3 is enemies. Enemies in the games. And Bloodborne has a slew of enemies that are very nightmarish, you could say. And they start off as just like these half, beast, human guys at the beginning, and they just get kind of worse from there because those guys get upgrades. There's these haunted priests, you could call them. Giants come around, snake monsters. It's getting worse. Wolves, werewolves, crazy deranged half crow dog things, puppet monsters. Oh geez, these guys in capes who are kind of like the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings. You have these giant pigs. You have these zombie type guys. They're all in there, and they're all in the realm of a nightmare type character, which fits the story very well, and also gives you a challenge in each new area because. A lot of times the enemies change drastically, and in this game they change a little bit, slightly enough that you can be on edge for most of the game. Although there is a lot of enemies who kind of repeat. They, like I said before, they just kind of get a little bit of a change to them, so they make you go in there and think, oh, it's just the same old enemy, and then something happens, and you're like, well, fuck. In Dark Souls, the enemies. In each area there seems to be a new set of enemies, and they're just they really go above and beyond with just how crazy these enemies are getting. In the first area, there's just these really wimpy undead guys who they come at you with swords or a crossbow. They're not too difficult. You go to the next area, they're kind of a little bit more strengthened. There's skeleton knights and stuff like that, and you go to the next area and there's zombies and suicide guys and man bats and crazy poison spewing turtles and giant crabs and the guys with giant sticks that will destroy your asshole. And then the next area you got wizards and warlocks, and the next area you have invisible enemies and giant knights in armor who just have the most random ass weapons, and it just goes farther and farther and farther and farther and farther, and by the time you're at the end of the game you're like, holy shit, I've fought so many enemies, I don't know which way is up and down, I don't know what's left or right, I've killed so much. And you sit there in a pool of blood and you contemplate life. And that's why Dark Souls gets the point for the enemies. Next up is category number 4, and category number 4 is controls. How are the controls in these games? Because both games have similar controls, but they also have very different controls. And Bloodborne has a little bit simpler in the control scheme. You do a light attack, you can do a light attack, and you can do a heavy attack. If you hold the heavy attack button, you can do a charged attack, which will stagger enemies, sometimes put them into a critical state. You also have a gun. You can use that to shoot enemies and sometimes get a critical shot to go in for the critical hit. And you also can transform your weapons too, which is a really nice aspect of this game because it takes something like a saw blade and then you can transform it so that it has longer reach. Or with one of my favorite weapons, the Hunter's Axe, you can transform it so it's a really long axe instead of being just like a short axe. Other weapons are more drastic. There's one that's called Ludwig's Blade, which goes from being this tiny ass sword, you put it into another sword, which is giant, and then you can use that as a giant sword and do plenty of damage with that. Or there's one that connects to a sledgehammer, or there's one each weapon is different in its own right, and it's very nice and interesting. But I'm not talking about weapons right now, I'm talking about controls. So the controls, you can knock on the enemies, you can choose not to, you can do rolls very easily, very fluidly. There's no blocking or parrying in the game, which is why you have to rely on your quick roll skills. Also in the controls department, you have your blood vials you can use, which is your health objects, and you can do up to the 2 weapons on each hand. rifles and firearms in one hand, and blades and stuff on the other hand. And then you also have your quick tabs and stuff like that. Very easy, very easy to get to and use at whim. As for Dark Souls 3, the controls are kind of similar. You have a light attack you can do. You have a heavy attack. You can charge the heavy attack to do a bigger hit. But now, instead of having a weapon and a gun, you have you can use a shield or a spell. In the other hand, the shield you're able to parry and you're able to block. Spells you can hurl just a regular fireball, or you can learn a spell from one of the vast instructors throughout the game, which can do devastating attacks if you level them up enough. Locking onto enemies is the same. You can still do rolls, but now your weight determines how well you roll. And I think that, pro tip here, the heavier you are, the harder is to roll out of the way. So I really suggest to keep your loadout light, or strengthen yourself so that you can carry the heavier weapons and the heavier armor. Because rolling is a very essential part of this game, because the blocking doesn't always work. The parrying doesn't always line up correctly, so you will take a few hits, which is why I prefer to roll instead of parry or block, which is also why I keep fire in my hand. But back to the controls. You have your quick tabs still. If you press it down, you can assign different things. So you can use, maybe you want to put fire on your weapon. You can put fire on your weapon, or use health vial, or use a magic restore vial, or use a homeward bone so that you can go back to a shrine, something like that. You can hold as many weapons as you want on each hand. Oh, I guess I should say up to like 6 weapons on each hand. But each weapon you add will increase your load. So be careful when using that. So I just usually keep one thing on each hand because I don't mess it around a lot. I have a very good weapon right now. And then what else? If you press up, you can equip multiple spells. If you have the right rings, bling bling, that'll help with that. So, and then also there's a quick tab in your pause menu, just like in BloodBorne as well. So as for controls, each game is good in their own right, and I really do prefer BloodBorne's style of having your a gun in the left hand instead of being a parrying or blocking system. But I can't really knock Dark Souls for having that, because it really sets it apart from BloodBorne. And I think it would be a real sin to give one or the other a point for controls, because they're both spot on and good for different types of players, which is good. You want to be versatile for your players, so that's why they both get a point in the controls section. Category number 5 is bosses. And this is a huge part of both these games, because both these games have outrageous, insane bosses. And which game has the more insane bosses? Which game has the better bosses? Oh, we'll discuss that right now. So BloodBorne, there are a good amount of bosses, and each one is a little bit different. Some of the side bosses are a little bit similar, but comparing them, you know that they're completely different. Like you can't really compare the Cleric Beast to the Dark Parl Beast, because the Cleric Beast is the first side boss you encounter. He has a great big reach. He's a wolf giant skeleton thing, and the Parl Beast is kind of the same, except he has electric attacks. So yeah, they're similar, but they have major differences that will determine what you need to use when you're facing them. And each boss is kind of like that. With beast bosses, you got to use the fire paper. With arcane bosses, you got to use something that's not arcane. So each boss kind of has a different feel to him, a major different feel to him actually. And the boss designs are very interesting. They all play into this whole gothic theme that I've been talking about. There's a few annoying ones in here. There's a few really hard ones and tough ones in here, but they're all beatable. I've beaten all the bosses except for the secret boss inside the dungeons, and I'm gonna start working on the secret boss after the ending of the game. But what was I saying? Shoot, I just lost my place, but I guess the bottom line here is, the bosses are beatable, and There's always you can tell when a boss is about to do a specific attack for the most part. A lot of them have tells, which will allow you to get out of the way. Um, so that's good for Bloodborne because I like a good challenge, and Bloodborne is a challenging game. But it's not a challenge. It's not like overly challenging like a lot of the Dark Souls games have been. So Bloodborne has very nice bosses, a very wide range of bosses, and they're all pretty fair for the most part until you get into the DLC. But I'm not talking about the DLC. I'm talking about the base game. So let's move on to Dark Souls 3. And right off the bat, you know it's Dark Souls. The bosses are going to be pretty outrageous, and there's a few of them that I've already fought and killed that looked outrageous. And I mean, they might have given me a little bit of trouble, died once or twice, and for the most part, they were pretty easy actually. You know, I've just now gotten to a boss with 16 plus hours of gameplay, gotten to a boss that's actually made me stop, and I've had to start leveling up to beat him. Even though I'm well above the level that I need to be right now in these areas, I'm like level 58, and you're supposed to be only at like level whatever. So I've been going through this game pretty fast, because just like Bloodborne, these bosses, they have a weakness. They have something that will give away their attack. They have something that'll give them major damage if you hit it in the right place. There's one boss, I forget his name, High Lord whatever. He's a giant skeleton guy, and he has these bracelets on his hands. And for the longest time, I was just trying to beat him up. And then I was hitting his bracelets, and all of a sudden one of the bracelets broke, and it did major damage to him. I'm like, oh, there we go. So, just like in Bloodborne, each of these bosses has something, a tell, weak point, that is able to get in there, you're able to get in there and really stick it to them. With this boss I'm fighting right now, who has double swords that are one's flaming, one's like, dark pow magic, and he's relentless, but I know there's a way to beat him, and I will figure it out, and I will fight to the end with this boss. And it's been a lot of fun fighting these bosses in Dark Souls. They're a lot more challenging. They do require a lot more luck, I guess you could say. It also requires a lot more skill. But like I said earlier, this Dark Souls 3 is a lot easier than its predecessors, and I'm kind of proving that right now with my playthrough of it. So who has the better bosses? What game's bosses really shine bright? And I have to say that Bloodborne's bosses are definitely better than Dark Souls 3 bosses, even though Dark Souls 3 took a look at Bloodborne's bosses and took a page from them and made them better than they were before. I still believe that Bloodborne had the more solid bosses, and the more fair bosses, I guess I should say. Next up is category number 6, which is weapons, which is a big part of this. And I know I already talked a little bit about this, but let's just dive right in. The weapons of Bloodborne all center around this. Hey, we kind of copied him. We didn't copy, but we kind of threw this together and we made this. So you have the saw blade, the threaded cane, and the hunter's axe. The pick at the beginning. And depending on your playstyle, you'll want to choose the one that closely matches it. The saw blade's a medium weapon. It's good for long and close, and it's good at slashing. The threaded cane is a close-range weapon to medium range weapon when transformed. It's good for a quick, clean playstyle, but it doesn't last you through the entire game like the other ones do. The hunter's axe is a heavy weapon if you like going in there and doing a few heavy attacks, or transforming and doing long-range attacks. This is the perfect weapon for you. So there's a weapon for everyone in this game. No, not all the weapons are really worth it. There's a few that I've found that were just so gratuitously bad, I wouldn't understand someone playing with them. I can't remember them right now, but just know that they are there. You also have all your rifles, your handguns, stuff like that for your left hand, which range from blunderbusses to the flintlock pistols, kind of, to repeating pistols and more sniper-like pistols. And they also vary. There's a giant cannon you can get, a Gatling gun, stuff like that. And it all goes back to your play style, what you want to use. So there's something for everyone in Bloodborne. And the same can be said for Dark Souls 3. You start off with basic weapons. Depending on what character you use, is what kind of weapons you'll get. So there's, you can either have a great sword and a shield, or you can have double swords, or a dagger, or just a shield if you really want to, and magic. Um, what else can you can use crossbows and bow and arrows and the heavy there's heavy weapons in this game too. There's huge weapons actually that you can get off of enemies. I've actually fought a guy who invaded my game who was using this huge ass sword, and I was able to just get in close and beat the hell out of him. So once again, it really depends on your play style, how you want to play this. And much like with BloodBorne, there's only well, I guess not like in BloodBorne, but in this game, if you find a good weapon and you're doing really good with it, it's good to reinforce it, because not a lot of the other weapons you get in this game are actually worth it. There's a lot you'll pick up that you'll just go, okay, selling this, stuff like that. And same with the shields and stuff like that. There's really not much better than what you start out with usually. And I see why they put it in there, is for the people who play with those lower characters who provide more of a challenge. But I think they really need to even it out when you're playing with the better characters. Keep the gear coming. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of the armor does the same thing as well. Like I find armor all around, but is it better? Is it good? Not really. I've been sticking with the same weapons and armor throughout my entire run, and they've been doing perfectly fine for me. So, in the weapons department, I'd definitely give it to BloodBorne. So as we stand, BloodBorne has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Dark Souls has 1, 2. And I guess category number 7 would be overall satisfaction, and really I'm kind of satisfied with both of these games. BloodBorne, I do like it better. I will say that right now. It is definitely a better game, but Dark Souls is right up there with it. I gave BloodBorne an 8 out of 10. I also gave Dark Souls an 8 out of 10. And I don't like to do 0.5s, 0.3s, whatever you want to do, because I like to round my numbers. And really, Dark Souls and BloodBorne are really on the same pedestal. Even though I like BloodBorne better, it's all personal preference, really. And I guess the one thing I really, really just want to say, just for the sake of saying it, is, you can go online and read reviews for both of these games, and people will just be on there bullshitting with you. Oh, it was so hard I couldn't get past the main menu. And they're just going for, a joke. Yeah, that's all they're going for. Really, if you take the time, if you have some skill, you can get through these games with a few problems, of course, but you'll be able to get through them, especially if you're playing with someone else through the whole thing. And if you take the time, use the energy, use your brain while playing these games, you will not have as bad of a playthrough. Yeah, the bosses are tough, and they take time to learn, and for you to learn how to fight them effectively. And once you do that, you can get through them no problem. Like I was saying before, fighting that giant skeleton dude, I didn't know what to do. He was killing me before I could even start, because he has a noxious cloud of gas that just hurts you. But it's when you figure out, oh, I need to hit the bracelets, that's when the bulb goes on and you go, okay, let's go for the bracelets. And that's when you win. You win when you use your brain. If you quit, if you bow down, if you bow out, if you just stop playing the game, the creators have won. The people who fucking joke about these games and say how difficult they are have won. Beat the trolls. Beat them. Just beat them. Play the game. Play it on whatever difficulty you want to. Play with whatever character you want to. But the game really, both games are beatable. Dark Souls is definitely easier than it's been in the past. How many years Dark Souls has been around? So if you are waiting on Dark Souls for whatever reason, if you've never played a Dark Souls in your life, Dark Souls 3, I know I'm using the Mass Effect 3 fucking thing here, but Dark Souls 3 is a good place to start. Because I got through the first 6 areas no problem. I mean, sure, I had to, go back and do a few areas a few times because I died, but that's just how you play the games. You die, you learn, you open up new areas, you get through them, you learn. You're able to farm the areas for more souls or blood echoes, and level up your character to become the ultimate badass that the game wants you to be. The creators don't want you to lose. The creators want you to have a challenge. So, quench your thirst for challenge. Play these games. And if you're not up to the challenge, don't worry about it. These games aren't for everyone. But if you're up for a challenge, you're up to use your brain, pick up one of these games, because they're both excellent games in their own right. So really, the winner out of this versus is BloodBorne, but the true winner is yourself. So thank you for listening. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't like the video, you can always do whatever you want. You can also check out my personal channel, which is Jarsh's Opinion. I have reviews, YouTube haikus, gameplay, a new series called YouTube Commentary. I have a lot of content on there that I work really hard at. So you can go there. I'm sure a link will be down in the description. If you want to, you can subscribe to this channel called The Rant. We have our own podcast on here where we talk about anything between comic books and video games. We also do live streams on Saturdays. You can tune in at those times and just, you can either listen to us talk or watch us play gameplay for a few hours. Then Robert, who is the person I do this channel with, he does another series called 5-Minute Reviews. He has a lot of information in a short amount of time. Very interesting, and also keeps you interested as well. For 5 minutes. And then you can also check out my other Versus episodes. I have a whole slew of them if you want to listen to them. So like I said before, if you like the video, please like. If you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel. Everything helps. Spread the word. If you don't like this video, leave a dislike. Leave some constructive criticism. And if you do leave a dislike, I might just compare you to crazy Minecraft kids.